Okay, this should be working. All right. Hello, hello. I'm not sure if I'm currently listening to music right now, so I don't know if it's actually going through, but should be okay. Um, let's see. Let's uh, let's have a look. Just so you know, it's quite a delay between the actual like live for me, um, and and the stream. So I'm seeing like maybe 10, 15 seconds of delay. So don't mind me being a little bit off in terms of my reaction. But yes, welcome to this session's Roam with me, with your host of Roam FM, Norman. But um, just need to make sure that the settings are working well. And yes, I think we should be all good. I hope everybody is doing well on this fine evening. It is currently 10 p.m. for me. And um, it's prime time to think about all kinds of things. You know, when you have like thoughts that surface up because it's at night, etc. But in my case, inspired by something that I saw on Twitter, I wanted to explore that in greater detail for this session. So let me just switch this over to here. Okay, so we have this session focusing on this specific tweet, which I will link in the live chat for anyone who is interested. I'll just leave it there. It's focusing on using projects to, shall we say, using projects to learn something, which is, I guess, interesting. It's a good way of putting it. It's not the only way to learn something, but it is one of the best ways to learn something, especially when you're trying to do something like, oh, I have a skill, I want to increase my prowess in that field. And one of the ways is to create constraints in the form of a project, trying to figure out what you're actually learning from this point, and then from there you're like, okay, from here on, how can I envision where my skill increase would go, or how can I envision the path in which me learning or developing this skill or field would increase. So Connor quote tweeting this: whenever you're learning something new, the key is to find a project with minimum viable interestingness, so you don't give up doing something too complex, but also don't get bored of a hello world. Now, I was like, this is interesting. So I saved it, and here I am. The thing is, I have not looked at the rest of the notes that Connor has down here in the same tweet thread. I choose not to. And the reason why is because I don't want to start immediately learning about the extent of what these answers are without knowing my own frontiers. So without knowing how much do I know about this question. If I were to try to answer it right now, with regards to everything in my knowledge graph at this point in time, how much can I answer it right now? And then later on, at the end of that session, I'm like, okay, I now find some places where I'm lacking. I have some questions that need answering, and I don't have the answers to them. That's when I start searching outwards. And I think this is gonna be heavily related to the first large session that we have, where we have the training creativity, learning something new. When I was actually prepping for this session, some of the blocks that came up when I was like prepping or priming for which searches, like which search algorithms I'm willing to try out to start filling out the blanks for actually answering this. It turns out that it had a lot of overlap with the session in the very beginning, like weeks ago. So might as well get right into it. And I have it right here. So we are starting off with the usual. Roam 42 enabled with JumNav, and I have my keyboard shortcuts and hotkeys custom made for navigating around Rome without using my mouse. So let's go. Oh, it's lagging a little bit. Interesting. Right. So, like we did before, reacting to this. And I want to take out all the text from the quote in question. So the quote is from, the tweet is from @Tyler Angert, or Angert? @Tyler. Pulling the quote out so that I can start splitting apart the different sections of the sentence into different different blocks that I want to expand on. So, for example, this seems interesting, so I'm like, here, minimum viable interestingness. So, like, you know, what does that mean? Like, what are some of the pretty obvious questions? Oh, whoops, I clicked the wrong button. Accidentally did the the shortcut for weekly notes, which is the Rome.js add-on, which I also should be using more because it's actually very useful, and I keep forgetting like the shortcut for it, so I keep like hitting it by accident, which is really annoying, but that's my own fault. Anyway, minimum viable interestingness is focusing on learning something new. So, also interesting that it keeps bringing up the tweet. I also just saw that there was... Huh, interesting. Okay, this is heavily related to the previous session. Okay, I'll explore that in a bit. Okay. I wanted to split this block in because of new as in what context? Oh. Just switching windows for a little bit. Okay. the tweet's blocking, ruining my CSS. That's pretty funny. Ah, well. Okay. If it's a completely new skill, we don't know what. Ah, yes, the thinkers drink tea at night. Definitely. Is there such a thing like a thinker's drink? Like some kind of coffee, I guess? I mean, normally I would drink coffee, but it's like freaking night, so I'm obviously not going to be doing that. I'm not trying to pull an all-nighter on Rome, which I have done multiple times. Those are actually the fun, like the really fun times because uh, madness starts speaking to you at night. So if you're up to listen to it, then you're gonna find some really interesting stuff that you can write down in your room graph. Anyway, that's a completely different thing. Um, yeah. Okay. So in the sentence, there is learning something new. I've split that into. So I have extracted that out of the sentence or the understanding, and I've split it into a question, new as in what context. There are two paths. One is a completely new thing, and the other is an extension of a current skill. So, for example, if I want to focus on writing, then I would know how to. I would consider this to be the latter because it focuses more on the improvement of a current skill set that I have, which is writing. So if I know how to write or if I know what to do, etc., then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yes, I know how to write maybe copywriting or fiction. Now I want to try something else, maybe business writing or academic writing. What are some of the things that I need to know, right? So the context is now, sorry, not the context. The constraints are clearer, which means that I can now define project a lot better. But on the other hand, if it's something completely different, say, I don't know, surfing, right? Like, I have no experience in surfing, but I'll have you know, I'm not really that much of a good swimmer, so I'm probably like really shit in that part already. But if it's a new skill, what are some of the things that I need to figure out, right? Like, what are some of the things that I need to clarify in relation to everything that I know and everything that I've embodied? Because if you think about it, right? Um, okay, the stupid tweet is getting annoying, so I was gonna link that so it doesn't pop up. It's my own fault, guys. It's my CSS. um, I just lost my train of thought. Bloody hell. Right. If it's something like surfing, a completely new skill, the questions start to broaden because you normally like the standard way of learning something new is like finding out what's available there in the world. So resources, guides, books, YouTube videos, etc. The uncommon way is to experiment. So the standard way is when you're like, oh, I want to learn about surfing. What's the best way to do so? So I'm like, okay, cool. Let me just search up. Oh, I wish I have a surfer's name in my head right now, but I don't know why I think of Kelly Slater, but Kelly Slater is a wakeboarder, but that's a little bit different. But let's just say some random surfer, right? Oh, I've heard of this person's name before. Let me search up about them, right? And then I just search all kinds of things. Then I I I become like a cartographer. I draw a map of the available knowledge and potential embodiment of experiences within the skill domain. So to what extent is, if it's surfing, how well can humanity surf right now? Right? We would look at like world champions. We would look at hobbyist surfers. We would just look at Australia because pretty much everybody surfs, right? Like I've been there so many times. Like just go to like Coogee Beach and people are actually Coogee Beach isn't really that great of a place to surf in, but like another beach in Sydney. But you just find pockets and fragments of communities who are interested in surfing, and they're like, okay, you can learn from them, right? You can see how are people handling these experiences, and then you just learn by sight, etc. But the uncommon way is to experiment. The uncommon way is to be very aware of what you know, which is having a look at everything that you possess right now, what you know, what you've tried, what you haven't tried, what you think should happen, and then with what you have or what you possess, try to find out what you're capable of doing. I mean, a crazy experiment would be to build your own surfboard. It could be a thing, could be a project, right? But the point of this exercise is that when we look at the first section of the sentence, when you're learning something new, that's when context is created in this tweet. Whenever you're learning something new, you need to define what's new. New is subjective at this point. New to you could be very different to new to me. And these are some of the examples here. So like if you look at here, 3, 4, 5, lines 3, 4, 5, they represent the potential paths for, oh sorry, not lines 3, 4, 5. Lines 3 can showcase the potential path in which one can determine what is a viable project and what isn't by setting the basis beforehand, by setting the criteria beforehand. So when you're learning something new, and if you follow the yellow line, so you follow this yellow line, when you're learning something new, you have to ask yourself new in what context, and then you ask new or new improvement, right? So that's pretty much what I'm trying to get there. And then the standard way of learning something new, so this should be learning. Learning is, one is the normal way, one is the uncommon way. So the sentence is technically complete from there, but the thing is, this tweet is less about the act of learning something new and more about the interestingness, the minimum viable interestingness part of it, right? Which is when we talk about things like motivation and I guess I'll just do an attribute. Yeah. No. I would say this relates to motivation. Which is where it gets really tricky. Now, when I was... It's pretty laggy today. When I was preparing for this, I'll just zoom this out for a little bit. I have a feeling that I've actually touched on this exact thought before in the first session. And I'll mention why. First, I need to do this. Copying a specific tag. I can fill up this first section really quickly. The problem then is figuring out this part. And I think I have a feeling I've actually touched on it in a few other notes. So here we are going to do a little bit of advanced block search. Right. Okay. That's useful. That's useful. Oh, are it? That's not useful. That's useful. That's useful. I could have just done this with a mention, right? Oh, damn. No. That broke it completely. Still need to learn how to use dimensions properly. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of Room FM does not know how to do mentions. Pretty funny. Oh, I'll just do it manually. I need to anyway. Let's go with these for now. Okay. Zooming out a little bit, and let's start popping these open. We're going to go into masonry mode for a little bit. Oh. Awesome. Okay. Oh no. What happened to my blocks? Okay, there we go. Where are you going? Okay, there we go. Right. Viewers who've seen the first session would know this one pretty well. While I went through this the last time. So I can actually reuse some parts of this. Ah. But it's less about how to learn something new, and it's more on motivation and how to actually maintain the cadence in which you learn something new through projects, right? So it's less of me trying to explain learning, and it's more of me trying to justify using projects as a motivator for learning. So I'll highlight this just to keep it in check. Yeah, keep it there. That is an ugly highlight. Yeah, fix that sometime. Anyway. Oh, no. If this is the gunpowder, then this doesn't need to be highlighted. Okay, cool. Okay. I'll prime these for later. I'll check out these other pages for later, but let's just focus on this for now. Minimum viable interestingness. Let's look away from the screen for a little bit. Hope you're doing well, everybody. So, minimum viable interestingness. If you have something you're interested in learning about, most of the time we start off with just figuring out what is there in the world, right? Like just what I explained before. But to determine whether or not something has some kind of minimum viable interestingness, we have to first define what is interesting. Such a simple yet profound question. What interests you? Actually, no, that's actually wrong. That's articulated in a irrelevant manner. What is interesting? Just like stopping there, just those three words, not what interests you. Because when you say what interests you, you already know what's the criteria, and then you're just stating off a list of what things that you like, right? Like, oh, I like games, I like music, I like dance, something like that. But when you say what is interesting, it's defining the word interesting. So what is interesting, and then what is the minimum amount of interesting that will compel me to start learning or deep diving more into it, is the point of the question. So if you go back to this, what is interesting? Probably another gunpowder. Never thought I'd be philosophical in this kind of thing, but hey, it's Rome. Another day in Rome is like that. Um, hmm. Even I don't know the question, like the answer to the question for myself. Because when I think of something that's interesting, I think of it as a form of unknown, and I have the desire to find out. Kind of like an exploration, or or a or like for an explorer or an archaeologist to find out the unknown, that an unknown that I'm attracted to, I guess. There's an unknown desire, or I am clear about a certain void in my life, and I feel that filling it with this improvement is beneficial. I've outweighed the costs of investing time and effort into learning something, and then I think, okay, it's worth it. There's also the relevance. I guess that's under the decision making. So technically, it should be these two are related, which is okay. The constraints are clear and concise. This one is a big one because that's when the projects come in, right? Yeah. Hmm. Relevance to one's life. I'm a bit stuck on this. I'm actually a bit stuck on this. This is a bit. It's funny, but you know, can't help it. uh. Hmm. Okay, attraction to the unknown, relevance to one's life, constraints are clear and concise. This is pushed by so pushed by the attributes, values, and principles of the individual, assuming I mean, yeah, it is under that umbrella, so I guess that it does make sense. Relevance to one's life, visible impact. I'll put this as optional. If, say, you are someone who is wanting to learn a skill and there is a visible impact if it's worth putting in the time, you would have a greater confidence level doing so because then you'd know it's worth it. Or technically, confidence levels only help with reassurance. So basically, you want reassurance that you're not wasting your time. If the overall output or impact at the end is clear enough for you, then you are reassured that you may achieve that level of result. It's a bit like guarantees in sales pages and landing pages, etc. It's like that. But yeah. Hmm. I put a recall tag at the bottom because when I saw the tweet the first time, I was trying to figure out a minimum viable interestingness memory in my head. So I have a recall tag for on making contact with a piece of information. Did I trigger a memory from before, like a childhood memory, whatever it is? In the 2000s, when I moved to Holland, I was involved in a number of like gaming forums, and in gaming forums you have those signatures. And I've always thought that those signatures where you have like all the graphics and the renders and the fractals and stuff were pretty cool. So I started learning how to use Photoshop to create those tutorials. And these tutorials were really, really long JPEG files that are they just show like, oh, how to do an exact copy of this exact signature. You get a render of a character, then you get a fractal, and you get a blend background, and then you do like a high pass or overlay, and you put some crazy font text, and all of a sudden, boom, you're way cooler than everybody else in the forum, right? Like I was really obsessed with that. That's not to say that I was interested in Photoshop per se, although at the time I was like 12, I guess 12 or 13. I was interested in Photoshop, but more so than interested in, say, like if we bring it back here, like more so than one level, learning something new. The motivation was more on the visible impact. The visible impact was that I could create cool shit, because what was relevant to me at the time was that I get to create a really cool signature at the end of the tutorial. Then my attributes at the time, or my principles at the time, was I really liked how cool it looked. I liked the aesthetics, right? Aesthetics is a huge thing. If you zoom it out to a more humane aspect, beauty compels, right? Beauty compels you to do something. In my case, beauty compels me to desire my own version of that beauty, which is a form of a forum signature, which is pretty funny. So it was relevant to me at the time, right? So I think this checks out. The constraints are really clear and concise because it's just this one tutorial, and it's not that long. It just takes like, if you start off the first time, then obviously you're going to be pretty crap. So it might take like an hour or two. But I got through a lot of tutorials, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm learning slowly and slowly. I'm starting to understand. And I don't think this was that strong at the time, because it wasn't like I was reveling in, yeah, this is not that strong for that memory. I guess curiosity got the better of me because I was trying to find higher levels of aesthetics through doing this kind of thing. So maybe this is not relevant for now. So I guess maybe when you have some attributes, you can say satisfying 2 out of the 3 criteria. No, I'll do a nest. Satisfying 2 of the. Yeah, 2 out of 3 criteria below is enough to make a project interesting. But now, when we look at what is the minimum, I'm going to bold that because that's relevant to the question itself. Like so far, I mean, I'm not sure if you can tell. The bold parts are relevant to the parent question or sentence. So I keep them bold to remind myself what am I actually trying to answer here. So, for example, if I go from here to, like, look here, from 4 to 14. So like this part here. These are just extensions of my own thoughts. I haven't answered the question yet. But I needed to push the frontier of what I currently know at the time so that I know how to start building the foundation from which I can start answering the question. So it's only when something is actually relevant like this, because I need to know the minimum for a minimum viable interestingness. that I bold it. Then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Because if I do this and I do, is it X? Yeah, X. And I expand, there's going to be a lot of text. And maybe I just want to glance at all the interesting parts, like relevant parts to the sentence, the parent thought that I'm trying to answer. I don't have to look at all of this. I could just look at the bold parts, right? So technically, this is also bold. Um, so what this is telling me, if I'm looking at this page now, is when you're learning something new, the hard keys, the keys to find a project with minimum viable interestingness. You have learning something new. What context? There are two ways to learn, and I have successfully or explored enough to have a good confidence level to continue to the next part. Then we have minimum viable interestingness, which is related to motivation. Then we have explorations. So what is the minimum? With the minimum of this thing. So technically, we should actually, yes, push it up to here. I need to nest this, block ref this, the minimum of all of the criteria. So for constraints that are clear and concise, can do the time frame has to be clear. The skill level has to be good enough. Challenging. So you can't have your answer spoon fed to you, like at least for 80% of the time. Well, relevance to one's life is kind of obvious there. Oh, actually, the visible impact part is actually important. Uh, did I ever write anything about impact? Also, I forgot to turn on privacy mode, but I think it's fine. I don't think I'm doing anything too crazy at the moment. Let's see. I honestly think that more so than the time frame and everything. Actually, well, it is. They're kind of equal. The aesthetics or the impact must be visible is actually a huge thing. Like, what is more attractive to someone who, say, wants to write, like, wants to build um, their writing capabilities? Like, if the example for now, right, is I want to learn the skill of writing. What is more interesting? The ability to learn the craft of writing constantly over a set period of time, or learning how to write a book in like 5 months. The thing is, as soon as I say the latter, the example is visualized. You immediately see a vision or a future where you are holding a published book with your name on it. If I say like how to write a book in 6 months through writing, right? So the impact is visible. You learn the skill, and there is a clear cut um, time frame, and it's challenging yet possible because of either the environment in which you're learning the craft, or that you have the correct environment attributes that allow you to actually thrive and actually create that book in the first place, um, and other things, right? Like motivators and all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff. That's the thing. Like impact is a very good. It's a really good way to determine whether or not a project is worth chasing after. Minimum impact is when it gets really difficult. So let's go back to this. When we talk about minimum impact, then, or results, must be worth it in a minimum time frame. Now, that being said, a book is a long time when you're trying to learn how to write, right? So you want to bring it down to a different time frame. But the thing is, if you say something like, "Oh, how to practice writing, etc.," versus how to start writing a blog post a week, so you've already visualized the output. After 7 days, you'll write a blog post or a newsletter or whatever it is. That's way easier and way lower barrier of entry into the same skill, but because the minimum is the path to success or the path to the end is a lot shorter, it's viable without compromising too much of the interestingness. Yeah, the compromise part is probably the important thing here. Oh, I forgot. I forgot something pretty obvious, and I've missed it out here. There is a unique factor to the minimum part of interestingness. And that is attention span. Did I write anything? Ah, I may have. Did I? I forgot what I wrote there. Let's have a look-see. Nope, nothing there. What is attention capital theory? I think this is from Cal Newport. Yes. Yeah, okay. Attention span is also something that I should touch on because the time frame is too great. Oh, sorry, no, not the time frame. Don't need that. I think I wrote a full attention as an or that I need to. Explore. Yeah, attention span is another one. Because even if something is super interesting to do, if all of a sudden you're suddenly distracted by something else, then boom, the project's gone. You're not complete. That project is not successful, which sucks. Happens to everybody. Happens to the best of us, to be honest. And then yes, on the Cal Newport one, which I shall which is actually very, very important to this. So I think it's actually put it under here. Oh, that's poorly written. Oh my goodness. Try it again. Sorry, went pretty went pretty quiet there because I was my mind was the gears were moving, and I ended up having to write it down before I lose it. Anyway, quick recap and me just silently typing everything out. Um, Attention span is another factor when we want to determine whether or not a project is fun enough, interesting enough, worth our time, whatever. Attention span becomes a really big thing. And I think I came across this term called attention capital theory, which is a topic that Cal Newport is interested in um, exploring, which in here is on modern knowledge work. The primary capital resource is human brains or attention span. The ability to create value through sustained attention, basically on the senses, on perception, on the receiving of information. You know, we talk about things like information overload and curation of content, etc. So to put it from a very analytical perspective, he built this theory called attention capital theory. We're not optimized for this, which is true because humans weren't really engineered from the get-go in their DNA to handle lots of information from the internet, because not all animals are built with the internet in mind. It'll be pretty funny if like dolphins had their own internet. What would they be talking about? Anyway, I'm going off of that. Yeah. So he had this theory and he wants to explore it in another time, which is going to be his next book. And I forgot when was this link created. I wish there was a date for this. You know, when you open link refs in the sidebar, it doesn't actually show the date, or it doesn't actually show the source. But I think that should be okay. He's going at this from a communications perspective, but I want to go at this from an output perspective, because there's a whole umbrella of it, right? Like if you have it out there and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, in the realm of attention capital theory, do I have complete control over all my attention capital? This means a complete audit of what I do with my devices, the internet, who I talk to, what I eat, etc. What I pay attention to, what I deem worth in my part of my attention. This tea is making me burp. I'm really sorry. Anyway, he's going at this from a very macro perspective. I am going around this for this session for a at actor level, as we say in international relations, at actor level or at the personal level or at individual level, which is fine. I think it will work there. And I think I want to explore my own version of this. But what I'll do is that I'll make this is not right. I'm gonna make here's what I'll do. Go back to here, thought mine, go here. I'm gonna make sure that I have a slug or URL to explore the word attention at another time. So building up my smart block. Put the attention capital theory weaponized there. Okay. And then back to the show. So I'll explore that another time. Attention seems like something that I want to explore or pay attention to in one of my private room sessions or something, I guess. Ugh, I really don't like it that the alias is this tiny link at the end of the thing. Um, okay. I'm very particular about how I do links to another block when I'm using it because the CSS helps me to underline like specific things that I want to to catch my attention. So Rome, there's no underline. There's highlight, there's bold, there's italics. There's no underline. And I'm okay with that. I don't use underline. But the fact that with this specific custom CSS, linking something create like creating a link to a block or a page via CSS creates the underline means that, oh, okay, I'm more encouraged to do so because the CSS will pop out and would catch my attention. And now I can look at this entire stream of thinking and look at it at different layers. So as an example, um, I can just read the text just as itself. So everything that's being said here, I can just look at the bold parts, just as what I mentioned before. And then I can also look at the links, right? So it's just like, oh, this is important. This is important. That's one example. It's more like this is important. Click to find out more, which means that there are hidden back end layers that are relevant to this thought, but they run in parallel. So if I'm willing to go down that route, I can just click on it. It's just a reminder, like a visual reminder. It's a bit like when you're walking on the journey and then you're at a crossroads and then there's like a sign that's like, oh, go west for Paris and go east for Tokyo, something like that, right? It's just a reminder. And it also reminds me, or it also reassures me that I'm just not, I'm just not talking out of my ass by just writing words that I'm like, oh, where did this come from? Like, where did this thought come from? Like, okay, there's at least there's something, right, related. So yeah. Um, I need to. Oh, sorry, not bold. Let's do italics for now. I think I've got most of this already done or covered. I'll have to reread the Cal Newport piece because the last time that he was talking about this was actually on a podcast episode. Hey, Ruiz, hello. Welcome. How are you doing, man? Oh, right, yeah, you don't use Roam. I'll have you know that this is a very customized, heavily customized Roam. So if this is your first time looking at the like at a at a someone's Roam graph live, it's not as pretty as this one. I have to say. I don't want to like blow up expectations, thinking, oh, everybody's Roam looks like this. Anyway, um, welcome to the thing. I'm just at a part where I've just finished looking at a tweet where if you want to learn something, find a project and then make sure the project is easy enough but still challenging, and then also interesting enough that you're not going to be bored. As much as I want to, like, I would love to just agree with it and just move on, but the thing is, there has to be way more nuance to this quote or this thought, because I went through this and I've had mixed results. Like, for example, this Hello World thing, like getting bored with Hello World. I've done courses, like online courses on HTML, because I thought, oh, maybe I'd be a coder or developer. Maybe, or like it was like, like maybe I could be like Eric, right? Like maybe because he codes, I could do the same thing. I think it'd be pretty sick. So I did online courses on coding, and I did the Hello World thing, and it was so forgettable that I forgot what I learned. So none of the, shall we say, none of the things that I learned were embodied. And I'll explore that in a bit. What I mean by embodied, I'll explain that in a bit. But because I did not embody any of those experiences, it felt like a waste of time. It felt like a project that, it felt like homework in school. Supposedly, you do the thing and then you learn, right? But then you don't really care. It's just another thing that you have to do every week. And I got bored. So I'm like, okay, why? Because I've done this before, and I didn't get bored, and I learned a lot. So I was just exploring that for the past, hour. Anyway, there is something else that I want to explore. Right. I'll explore attention capital theory another time, so maybe I'll save that for another live stream where I focus specifically on the world of attention. But let's just close that for now. Yeah, I'll have you know that the minimum viable interestingness phrase is not coined by me. I found it on Twitter. I would probably use a different phrase. I don't like this. This sounds very Eric Ries, startup entrepreneur, lean startup-ish. That kind of language, which I don't mind. I just, I don't know if I would want to keep that as a page. I mean, I would think like minimum amount of fun, right? How to have more play in your thing. How long are your Roam streams? My Roam streams tend to be around 1.5, 2 hours long. And recently I've been trying to make it so that I have a regular schedule. Although I haven't, I intend to make it a regular thing, but I haven't chosen a specific time. So yeah, let me know, like, if you're thinking of like a specific timing that you want to tune in. I'm thinking either Thursdays 10 p.m. or Mondays 10 p.m. or Thursdays 10 p.m. One of those, where it's just 2 hours of me just typing out random stuff. What's wrong with startup-ish? I don't know. It sounds. I, I don't know. The language sounds very choking. Um, you know how it is. You know, it sounds very like innovative hustle culture and all that. I don't know. I just don't like. I don't know. I don't like that kind of language too much. Too much in my head. I think it's just the disgusting taste of the word entrepreneur when it's being thrown around. It's been commoditized. That's probably why. Anyway, let's move on to the next part. Okay, so an extension of this is this thought here. Learning within the context of projects. Now, we've already, earlier in the stream, we've already talked about where did I find it? I think it's here. Earlier in the stream, we've already talked about how projects work well for things like this. And one of the points is that constraints are clear and concise. When constraints are clear in a project, we have a clear idea of what happens at the end. Keeping in mind, the definition of project in this session right now is that a project is not exploratory. It's like, oh, I have a skill, I want to learn it, and I know it's considered a success if I'm capable of doing X, right? So that's a project, right? So what I'll do is that I'll go to line 16, reference this block. So I'll take the code for it, go all the way down, and I will ref it here. So this is now, we have the question of attributes in an interesting project. We have determined what they are. Oh, actually, I should bold this because that's actually important. These are important. And now by referencing this to the line down here, it is now a continuation of this specific thought. And where was I going with this? Right. So I have another thought that I had from intended hourly learning. And I think this, I got this from a conversation I had with one of my clients for a coaching call where we were talking about active versus passive forms of intentions and learnings, etc. And when you dedicate or time block a specific amount of hours and you measure it to the point of logging in how well you did, etc., you start to become more intentional about practice hours. So those hours where you put yourself in that kind of context immediately. And that works really well. And that in itself is a project. It's a continuous project. So when we take the block ref here, and I will put it there, and I will embed. So now we see it right there. So I've already embedded this, which means I don't need to look at this anymore. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. The clear the constraints, the the clear, the constraints, and the measuring system. If we do something like, okay, for me to be a better writer, I should write 1,000,000 words. And I forgot who said that. There's a quote, actually, something like, to be a good writer, write your first 1,000,000 words because your first 1,000,000 words are going to be trash. Once you run out of 1,000,000 words, once you write the first 1,000,000 words, you will have nothing left but the better words in your next 1,000,000, which is, you know, a measurable project, I guess. And you want to handle that by doing something weekly or something daily. So when you are given the opportunity to learn within a specific context, then, and the constraints are clear and concise, the clearer the capability of measuring something, the clearer the path towards that intended output, which works really well here. I think that, as much as I might be repeating myself at this point, but I think that makes it a lot more important when, and also universal, when you want to apply this to anything. Let me see if I can just export for it a little bit. Okay. Spelled something wrong there. In general, when we explore anything, if you frame it as a project, if you introduce the constraints intentionally by yourself, then that is internalized motivation, and then you turn it into this like brick wall so that you know where to turn left and to turn right all the way until the end, which is a form of motivation, which is good. Oh, thanks, Ruiz. Thanks for coming, man. On a more meta and philosophical level, why we do that in the first place normally comes from an inherent desire to create a better version of ourselves. But we want to do that in the most adventurous way possible, hence why interestingness becomes a factor. But then there's attention span, because you can't compromise too much of that, otherwise you will just drop it. So there's like this like three-way battle between your desire, your the desire, the relevance and interestingness of the project, and no, maybe not. That may not be it. Is it a three-way conflict? Might be dangerous to frame it as a battle, though. I can think of it more as a passionate conversation. Hmm. This is on different types of knowledge, and I think I should cover that in another session. Yeah, this is where I want to introduce this thought that if we frame everything as a project, or if we frame learning as a project, sometimes depending on that framing too much as a source of energy or motivation may or may not be a good thing. I forgot why I wrote that. Yeah, I was producing one of the episodes for the Superhuman Academy podcast, and one of the fellow coaches, Daniel Lathan, is um, he focuses on, he's like a PhD in neurology, I believe, and he's focusing on things like addiction and how specific substances affect one's brain. And I think in the episode he was talking about like how alcohol actually disrupts the brain in so many different ways, and sometimes it's not even at the surface at all. Um, and I think I had a thought that learning is state dependent, because because when learning is state dependent, where things have to be right before we start learning, it actually narrows our peripherals because we choose not to learn until these things are in position. Things like, oh, I must drink coffee before I start my workday, or oh, I must have my Roam graph open before I start learning something, or uh, um, oh, I must have these specific things, keyboard shortcuts on my keyboard before I can initiate my writing, etc. When something is state dependent, it becomes a lot harder to break away from that habit when things like learning, things like writing, things like thinking, especially learning in this context, is meant to be a universal thing. How can you learn from doing anything that you possibly can? Writers work really well because they embody all the experiences around them as they're living life. They just happen to be the best at the articulation of such experiences, and they bundle it up so that we can experience it. But to do so, they must learn what's around them physically, mentally, and emotionally. So, in a way, writers are the best learners for some people. When you frame something as a project, you introduce those constraints, and those are always really good. They're not always the best for certain intentions. If you want to learn a skill and you have those constraints, you know exactly what will happen technically in a project. But then therein comes the spectrum of projects, such as how open should a thing be? How open uh, should those constraints be, or should you even have constraints? I like to look at constraints in the form of questions, not projects. That's why I would rather not focus too much on projects. That's why I had this thought in the first place. And I forgot who was it that wrote. Is it Khalil? I think. I think it's like a tweet on tolerance of messiness. I need to put that in. I just remember reading a tweet about messiness and organization. It's the same thing here. It's just organization. Projects are just organizational guides to reach up to a certain point of improvement. Well, learning projects, right? But then if your projects are more open-minded or exploratory or democratic even, then maybe those constraints are unnecessary, and that you don't have to define what is considered learning. You just relish in what you have gained through the exploration of the learning. Of course, you block off with some constraints in terms of stuff that you already know, and then you just like go in a direction where all these new things are coming in and you're like, oh, okay, cool. This is new. Let me try it. Let me have fun. Let me enjoy this learning process. I've never heard anyone say that they have enjoyed a project. Maybe they've enjoyed working on a project, but can you enjoy a project? Can you learn? Can you enjoy a learning project? Right? Is probably the thing there. But then I might be just touching on semantics, which is not that great. Anyway. This is not exactly relevant to... I think. I can put it here. Don't need it for now. And I have the note from the first session. Maybe I can use some of these things. No. Oh, no. Oh, no. Okay. changing the order because I'm thinking that I normally start off with the good stuff and then the bad stuff after. um, when exploring anything, I need to know what I don't know first before I start, which sounds very Plato-like. Or was it Socrates? Who was it that said that? All that I know is that I don't know. What was the quote? I forgot. Anyway, so just connected this specific header from this previous note here. I had this. I don't know if I finished it. Let me see. No. Okay. No. This is irrelevant. Maybe. I'll put a maybe here. I might have this in my head, but I think I need to like explore it another time. So I'll do a to-do for a diagram here. Kind of like a chaos order flywheel of information. When learning anything or learning everything from the void or the ether, of course, there's different ways to do so. There's the chaotic way where you just learn from anything and everything that you reach out around you. But then there's the orderly manner, which is basically like a project, right? You are aware of what's happening. That's why there's more order than there's chaos. But then chaos invites creativity. So when you have something like the intention to learn and then barely any constraints to do so, yes, you're going to be very, I don't want to say directionless, but you're going to be wandering a lot. But that unpredictability invites muses or potential creative directions that you never would have thought of or never would have discovered if you didn't do so in the first place. So I'll probably create a diagram of that. Okay. I blocked ref the increased surface area of understanding to this section here because we want to increase the chances of us learning or discovering something new. And there are different ways to do that: chaos and order. And in the path of chaos, like most of the time, you can do so through this. Yeah. Is there anything else that I want to cover? No. I think so. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I think I'm done. I also need to start posting the ones that I wrote out in the first session, actually in public, for people to like start like commenting on or trashing or whatever. But yeah, I think that's done for this session. So let's do a recap of everything that has happened. So I haven't even looked at the resources that Connor put in the tweet thread, but I think I'll expand upon that another time in addition to what's been written here. Let's do a word count. 800 words in 2 hours? That's okay. Then again, I was talking a lot, so it's fine. So, reacting to learning through projects, right? And the reference tweet is in the live chat already, but I have the quote right here, so that's fine. Whenever you're learning something new, the key is to find a project that has minimum viable interestingness, so you don't give up doing something too complex. When you expand it, learning something new, whether it's a new skill or a new improvement, we need to determine what it is, the extent of what we know, or what we know currently and how it can overlap into the new skill. There are normally two ways of learning. One is the standard way, which is finding out what's available and then just like going through it, or experimenting. And a way to increase the percentage chance of you actually learning something is to embody it physically. Where when I say physically embody something, I mean, I don't want to say something woo-woo like, oh, feel it in your bones. But most of the time, whenever you have things like epiphanies or a sudden burst of passion and fire in actually creating something, this capturing of an idea that you want to immediately express, or a painting that you suddenly had in your head and you want to paint, or a skill that you really want to grow, and all of a sudden you're given the chance to grow, and if there's a path where you can do it normally and then you can do it physically, or you can even embody the entire experience where you can use the entirety of your body to go through the process of learning it. Using the entirety of your body increases the chance of you actually learning it, because you use more of your senses, your perceptions. So yeah. And then we defined minimum viable interestingness in this tweet, which is related to basically motivation or finding something fun. Do I have fun as a... Oh. Put it as an attribute. And we have some gunpowder here, right? So in the context of my graph, gunpowder is basically questions that would trigger me to explore into specific directions. What is interesting? Like, I don't know, philosophical level. Things like relevance to one's life, an entity that has crossed paths with my life, and I have subconsciously decided that it should be part of my life. Therefore, it's interesting because I'm paying attention to it, right? It's a trade, it's a transaction. It's a transaction of my breath and my senses for its existence in my time on Earth. And then in the realm of projects, what is an interesting project? Constraints, relevance, and the desire for the unknown at the end, right there. And then the minimum version would be, we take out that. Still a visible impact, yet the time frame is not too long. So greatest in one day, how much impact can you do in that small time frame? And also taking into account the attention spans. Need to nest that because I want to connect that there. Yeah. Talked about attention capital theory, but then I want to focus more on attention later on. In another session probably. So I'll save that. And then zooming out, we have the event, not on like projects or learning, but the event in which an individual learns within the context of a projects. I wanted to question that a little bit more. So things like ensuring the attributes of a clear and measurable project would determine whether or not that project is viable in the first place, such as counting the number of hours of practice. And on a general level, using projects as a framework for learning. Is it good? Is it bad? Before you even... Oh, yawning. Oh, God. Before you even start, you need to know what you don't know first, which is call back to the first session. I need to do this diagram another time. Projects are a form of orderly constraint because, you know, it hones you in on a specific direction because you know that will give you benefit. But do you want that when you're learning? It's very subjective. It's up to you, right? And it could be a source of motivation. Because if a project helps you visualize an end goal, which I will bold here, then that end goal is a source of motivation. But you have to be careful about depending too much on it. Otherwise, you will only learn in that context and you would just be dumb in any other external context. And there we ask, are you truly learning? Are you truly learning if the only way that you learn something is through a project? That's the hard question there. Now, truthfully speaking, yes, projects are a great way to learn something. But it should not make the bulk of your path to learning a specific skill. I look at it as having a ratio of some kind of exploratory phase in which you're learning about a skill and then a project to have that in parallel. How much time is it spent? Let's say you take 2 hours. Maybe 1 hour is for a project. 1 hour is for fun exploratory versions of that skill. Maybe reading about how other people do it. Maybe just playing around with like materials if you're like doing something that's like woodwork or whatever. And then the project is an actual project that you follow. I think there's a balance there. I don't think learning is so one dimensional that you only learn through projects. I don't think that limitation should exist. Learning through projects is a great way of doing something, but it is merely one of many in the toolkit of learning. So let me put that back in there. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can always find fun elsewhere, and then some of the fun can be in the project. So yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. I guess should be all good. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Well, yeah, I think that's it for now. Man, 2 hours thinking about this. That's okay. All in a day's work. I guess this live stream in itself is a form of project. Like trying to explore this. So quite happy. Quite happy. I think that's it for this Rome session. Another addition to the game film, the world of knowledge work and thinking, using Rome for this. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the roller coaster ride of me talking to myself for 2 hours as I'm talking about this. So, yeah, take care, and I will see you in the next video. This is Norm, and take care.